Story 1. Had an apartment in a pet-free building. Then one of the units caught fire. When the landlord arrived, everyone was outside with their dogs, cats, and birds. The fire department was inside still looking for a pet skunk that had escaped. That was a fun morning. The landlord just left. No one got in trouble for their pets. And yes, the skunk was saved. Story 2. We had signed a pet addendum that the agent gave us and paid an additional pet deposit. It turned out the landlord had no knowledge of this, did not approve the addendum, and did not allow pets at all. Fortunately, we had copies of the document and the emails the agent sent us with the document attached. They asked us for proof of all vaccinations and parasitic treatments from the veterinarian, as stated in the addendum, or threatened to take the entire pet deposit. We provided the documents and they did not take any of the pet deposit. The agent made a serious mistake, but it was a valuable lesson to keep all records, even if you think they are unnecessary. Story 3. We were looking at an apartment and realized they did not take pets at all. The owner really liked us. Newly married, very polite. She asked if we had a picture of her. It was 1991, but I had a few wedding pictures and a couple of photos of Sammy in my purse. She said, "She looks very small. Must be a miniature Siamese." I said, "No, just cat-sized." She said, "I am certain she is a miniature. I could allow a miniature." So our lease says miniature Siamese, and she did not ask us to pay any extra. And that was what it was like in the olden days, kids. Story 4. My roommate had a fluffy orange cat already, and about 2 months into living together, I adopted an old man tuxedo cat from the shelter. I don't know why I never mentioned it to the landlady. She was a quirky hippie who lived an hour away and almost never came to the apartment. Eventually, my roommate broke the lease and moved out of state, and I stayed until the end of the lease. When the landlady came by for the final inspection as I was moving out, she looked at my black and white cat and said, "Huh, I could have sworn your cat was orange. Guess I need to slow down on the pot." I did not correct her. Story 5. My landlord found my hamster when getting the apartment master keys that I found on the floor from one of the employees. I found the keys at night and took them. The first thing in the morning, I called them. They wanted the keys as soon as possible because they needed to enter my apartment while I was at work. They saw the hamster and said nothing, as I saved them thousands of dollars from having to change the locks. Story 6. Kind of the opposite, but a fun story. I was touring an apartment and on the screening call they asked if I had any pets. I was honest and said that I was a teacher and I have a guinea pig class pet. The school turns off the heat at night, so he comes home with me each day. No problem with that. I get there for the tour and everyone in the leasing office is looking at me weirdly, including the person I was meeting with who was a parent in the classroom next door. She asks me about pets and seems apprehensive, and I tell her it's just Jigsaw the guinea pig that her son is obsessed with. She gets this moment of realization, cracks up, and excuses herself. I then hear her in the back room of the office saying, "Guys, it's not a pot-bellied pig. It's a guinea pig." Yeah, whoever did the phone screening only wrote pig on the form, and they thought I was bringing an animal right off the farm. The leases didn't specify no farm animals, so they would have accepted me with a farm pig. But alas, I just had my dumb as rocks piglet. When she returned, she tore up the pet paperwork, waived all fees, thanked me for giving the leasing office some excitement, and made me promise to let her know if I ever decided to upgrade to a larger pig variety. Second edit. Yes, I know guinea pigs should be in pairs. Jigsaw had a brother at my parents' house and my mom and I taught at the same school, so they were together daily. Different ages and couldn't be in the same cage, but spent most time cage to cage. We always had solo pigs growing up, but learned our lesson when I moved out and never had solo pigs after that. Story 7. I had a good experience happen. It was my first apartment, and my girlfriend's friend gave me a kitten as a birthday present because she had heard me talking about getting a cat and found a box of kittens on the side of the road. I loved that cat, but don't do this, kids. It took 6 months before the property manager saw the cat in the window while walking the property. I received an email asking about it. I lied and said I had just gotten the cat and hadn't had a chance to notify them yet. They said the pet deposit was $200. So I wrote a check and dropped it off at the office, expecting that to be the end of it. 2 weeks later, I got a knock at the door. It was the property manager with a pet gift basket, telling me that my cat was the reason they caught an employee embezzling tens of thousands of dollars. The off-cycle check knocked over a precarious tower of cards that one of the receptionists had been maintaining, and it all came tumbling down. The cat got lots of treats that night. Story 8. I lived in a small basement apartment and rescued a sick elderly cat. He was not capable of jumping up onto the windowsill, so I did not have to worry about that. One night around 3 a.m., I came home and caught the building supervisor, who lived across the hall from me, taking out the trash. There was a cat standing in the doorway. We both froze for a moment, and then I told him I would keep quiet about his secret cat if he let me hide mine during inspections. He agreed. Now we have two nearly identical cats, so they are merged into a single pet on applications. My spouse and I have started collecting letters about our cleanliness as pet owners whenever we move, to give to the next landlord. So far, it has worked out well. Story 9. I had a friendly stray cat, probably a pet someone dumped, who decided to move into my place while I was renting during graduate school. The landlord was very hands-off and rarely came around, but after I had the cat for months, he stopped by because my air conditioner was broken. I had planned to keep the cat outside when the landlord was coming, but he showed up unannounced. Because it was very hot inside my house, I had opened the doors for air circulation. The landlord walked in and saw the cat lounging on my living room floor. He said, "Oh, I didn't know you had a cat." I looked him in the eye and said, "I don't know that cat." I don't know if he believed me, but he shrugged, and nothing more was said about it. The cat and I continued living there for about 3 more years. Story 10. At one apartment where we lived, cats were allowed but dogs were not. I had a very large black cat. One day, I was bringing him home from the veterinarian and carried him in my arms. The property manager saw me, and when I went back to my car to get his carrier and my purse, the property manager told me I was not allowed to have dogs. When I told him I did not have any dogs, he asked about the black dog he just saw me carrying. I laughed and told him that was my cat and invited him to come see if he wanted. He said it was all right and that he believed me. Weeks later, the property manager saw me and told me he had seen my cat on the balcony one day, and it was one of the biggest cats he had ever seen. Story 11. I had a landlord try that stunt on me. I told him about my cat and even had the cat's name included on the lease. The landlord met the cat many times, and the property manager had a picture of my cat on her office wall. I moved out after 4 years, and during our final walkthrough, my landlord said, "We still have to settle the issue with the cat. You never told me you had one, so you owe me 4 years of pet rent." I was stunned. He pulled out a fake lease that said I had no pets and that if I wanted one, it was $50 a month. Luckily, I still had all my paper files with me and pulled out my copy, signed by both of us, with the cat's name on it. Story 12. My parents hid a cat from their landlord in their first apartment, which had a no pets policy. The cat insisted on sleeping in a window where everyone could see her. Obviously, the landlord found out, but he never said anything about it other than, "That's a pretty cat you've got there." Story 13. I never hid pets myself, but I worked in a leasing and maintenance role during college and had a couple of run-ins with unfriendly dogs that were not supposed to be in an apartment. Nothing is like having a large dog appear out of nowhere to bark at you when you are just there to update the fire extinguisher. We also had people abandon pets we did not know were there several times, and that was always horrible to varying degrees. There were a couple of times we found really starved animals and did not know if they were neglected before or if the people left without informing us. Story 14. I had a hamster in the military barracks. I stole his wheel because it squeaked during room inspections and hid the cage under my sink. This was only during inspections. Otherwise, he had his wheel and son. I was overseas, so he was already old when I adopted him. Families could drop off unwanted pets at the veterinarian there for other families to adopt. He died before I was caught. We had a funeral for him. I painted a tea box black, and we sneaked out behind the laundry room to bury him under the cover of night. A friend sang a little song, "Rest in peace, Sybil." I got a ferret next but left and gave him away before I was caught. Word got around that I was getting away with it and someone else got a cat and was caught. They had to complete standard military paperwork for being in trouble and got rid of the cat. Story 15. My landlord found out when a repair technician saw my dog's bed during a routine inspection. I tried to play it off as if I was just pet sitting, but the landlord did not believe me. They ended up charging me a pet deposit retroactively, which was better than being evicted. Story 16. When my building superintendent found out we had cats, she started coming into my apartment without notice to bring them gifts. I came home one day, and my cat had a little bandana collar on. He never wears a collar. I don't buy him toys with bells because he will never let me sleep again. So where did this jingle ball come from? It was the superintendent. In my city, the law was that if anyone from management knew we had pets and did nothing for 90 days, they could not enforce the no pets clause anymore. I said nothing and let her do her thing. Story 17. I had an illegal cat when living in a student room. Pets were not allowed, but I could not live without a cat. One of my friends lived in the same house and had cats as well. She told me the landlord hardly ever came around, so I took my chances. I had an amazing time with my little cat. She helped me not feel lonely since it was my first time on my own. After about a year, the landlord came by unexpectedly, and the cat greeted him happily. He told me she had to go. I was very upset and did not know what to do. Although I was already an adult, my father called the landlord and convinced him to let me keep her for the remaining 8 months I would be living there, as I had to study abroad and would move out. I have always loved my dad for that, and the landlord was kind for allowing it. I bought him a big bottle of expensive alcohol as a thank you. The cat sadly died last year at the age of 16 and had always been my little girl. She hated most people but loved my now husband. I loved her and still miss her. Story 18. College apartment complex. My roommate found a cat on the side of the street and decided to adopt it, even though I was allergic to it. The cat scratched up the 2 couches and walls in the main shared space. The apartment management found out because she cut a square in the window blinds for the cat to look out on the first floor. An employee walked by and saw the cat sitting in the window. This ended up costing her approximately $4,000 in fines and replacement couches. Story 19. My landlord came into the apartment one day to talk about something, though I can't remember what. The cat I had gotten about 3 months prior jumped in through the window and started winding between the landlord's legs, purring loudly. The landlord looked down and then at me. I looked back, steady in the eyes. We maintained an unusual amount of eye contact as we finished the conversation and he left. We never spoke of it again. When I moved out, the landlord returned more than my original deposit, presumably by accident. I think he just liked having an easy, generally trouble-free tenant and chose to let it slide. Story 20. Not my story, but my fiancé's friend. He and his now ex-girlfriend had 5 cats, 2 ferrets, and over 10 guinea pigs in their apartment. They started with a couple of cats and snuck them in. The collection of animals grew over time. They lived there for several years. Eventually, people began to complain about the smells and noises they heard. Whenever there was an inspection, they would know ahead of time and bring the animals to a family member's house or elsewhere. One day, the landlord received enough complaints and went to check the apartment unannounced. He did not call them. He found the animals, gave them a hefty fine, and rightfully evicted them. The apartment reeked. It was horrible. Story 21. My landlord in college allowed caged pets but had a no-zoo animals policy. He tried to evict me because I owned a snake. I involved student legal services, and they argued that no zoo animals is absurdly vague and that because I am not a zoo, my snake is not a zoo animal. Story 22. Not the landlord, but the oldest resident of the trailer park was managing the property for them. We have a Chihuahua and a pug. When she met them, she said, "Don't worry about it. I don't pay it either." Then we met her 6 Chihuahuas. Story 23. Got caught when I got a second cat. The manager said I could keep him as long as nobody complained. I moved about 6 months later. Story 24. I said I have never seen that cat before. How did it get into my house? He was a stray and just showed up one day. There was no litter box, he had a way in and out. He mostly hung out on the enclosed porch. Rest in peace, Gus Chiggins. Story 25. Not mine, but two of my roommates each had a dog when I was in college. We had been having sink and garbage disposal issues and had submitted a work order for it. The maintenance technician came over when everyone was out. Both dogs were in their cages, but only one barked when they heard him come in. This scared the other dog, who ended up painting the wall behind his cage brown. The maintenance technician heard this, went to check it out, and found the poor dog and the wall covered in feces. That was a crazy situation to come home to, now that I think about it. Story 26. Yes. The point is, when the cat knocked a statue into the toilet, I paid to have it replaced because it was lodged in the U-bend. Years later, I was at my landlord's house and noticed their cats, so I asked if pets were allowed. What kind? They asked. Cats. I said. Sure, no problem. They responded. How much is the pet deposit? I asked, fully knowing the landlord was already aware of carpet damage caused by a roommate locking him in the closet. Cats? No deposit, they said. Now I have 4 cats, and they are known by the landlord who does not care. Story 27. Nothing happened because he found out by sneaking into my apartment when I was not home. Therefore, he could not reveal that he knew I had a pet without admitting he was trespassing. He moved out a few months later with no consequences. Story 28. I rented a no-pets apartment but hid my cat for about 6 months. One day, my landlord randomly showed up for an inspection, and my cat walked right up to him. I thought I was in trouble, but he just said, I hope she does not cause any trouble, and let it slide. I got lucky though. Some people do face eviction or fees. It is definitely a gamble. Story 29. I got evicted. I had a 6-month-old cat I wasn't supposed to have, and she got on the windowsill one day when I was at work. They said their policy was due to their maintenance man having severe allergies, but they had another building I could move into that did allow pets. It had an additional bedroom, sun porch, dishwasher, and central air for only $100 more in rent, which I was fine with. I moved to the new place with no problem. However, it was the same maintenance man with the supposed severe allergies. Story 30. My parents hid my cat from the landlord when I was in 3rd grade. Later, I had to give her away, which was difficult because I had started kindergarten with that cat. Story 31. As a landlord, I've had this happen to me twice. The first time, they hid a dog from me. I came over to fix something and saw the puppy. They said it was a friend's dog that they were pet sitting. 6 months later, I came over for something else and saw the same dog. I told them I didn't care as long as it had its shots, and they paid a $300 pet deposit. The second time, they told me they had a cat when they moved in. I found a second cat locked in the basement. I told them the deposit was a $300 flat fee, not per pet. The most recent tenant had a dog that they told me about. It destroyed a door when it accidentally locked itself in a room. Then I got the carpets cleaned, and the cleaner said he found a lot of dog urine in one room, but I suspect that was from the dog in the first example. I don't mind as long as people are honest with me and I find out about it. Dishonesty breaks my trust and makes me wonder what else they're hiding. Story 32. My first apartment alone was a lonely period, and I wanted a cat. I turned in the monthly rent check and asked the manager about the policy. She told me technically there was a no pets policy, but also told me where several local shelters were and that she would not tell if I did not. That cat was my best friend and the only reason I made it through that period of my life. Story 33. We originally wanted to get a dog, but our landlord declined due to dogs being noisy. So we got a cat but did not tell him. Later, there was a mouse problem in the apartment building. An exterminator came with our landlord to inspect and ask if we had seen any mice. We had not, and the exterminator did not find any evidence that mice had entered our apartment. The exterminator saw our cat tree, pointed to it and said, "This is why they are the only ones with no mice." My landlord looked at us, at the cat tree, and said, "I guess that worked out. We got lucky that our cat potentially saved him money. His wife met our cat recently, and our cat made sure to get in her good graces too." Story 34. My downstairs neighbors had a cat. They did not inform the rental company that manages the apartments. However, they were found out because the cat often sat in the window and was spotted by a staff member of the agency who was there to check on the condition of the bins at the back. The bins specifically belonged to that apartment, as they had repeatedly failed to keep up with bin collection dates for weeks at a time. Several of us, residents, the shop downstairs, and neighboring properties, had complained. The cat was the last straw. They were messy and had trashed the communal area at the back of the property. He literally dismantled his and his friends' cars in the parking area, leaving tools and car parts scattered around for months. He would rev his engine at 5 a.m. for 20 minutes before driving off to work. The cat was an indoor cat, which is fine if you clean the litter tray regularly. He and his girlfriend did not, so the cat urinated and defecated all over the apartment. The smell of ammonia was noticeable in the corridor. I know they paid a refundable deposit on the apartment equivalent to 1 month's rent, £500 at the time of moving in. They did not get any of it back because the apartment had to be fumigated, repainted, and recarpeted due to the damage from the cat and oil stains caused by his car repairs. I don't think they vacuumed more than twice in the year and a half they lived there. They nearly set their kitchen on fire twice. They also regularly left the communal entrance door unlocked, which allowed strangers to enter the building on several occasions. I would not have minded them having a pet if they had actually taken care of it and the property. A nice, quiet Hungarian father and son live there now. I never hear anything from their apartment. Story 35. We put our cat in the bathroom while the landlord came over. She somehow got out and was sitting on the top of the couch directly in front of the door. Thankfully, the landlord found it funny and said she did not care because it was not her rules. Story 36. My parents had a no-pet clause for the tenant who lived in the downstairs apartment of our house. His daughter left her toy poodle for him to watch for a few days, and my dad saw the dog. According to my mother and the tenant, who was an amazing person, my father got down on the ground with the dog, saying, "Oh, who's a good boy? It's you." The dog was allowed to visit any time. Story 37. We signed the lease, and it said, including pets deposit. We told them we had a dog at signing and paid a deposit. Later on, we acquired a pet cat, and since the lease said pets, we figured we would be fine. Months later, we received a notice saying they saw the cat and that we needed to talk to the office and sign a new deposit. I took a copy of our lease to the apartment office and pointed out it said, pets. They said no, they meant just our dog. I replied that the lease says pets, and we paid a deposit for pets. A lady called over her manager. After some discussion, the manager said they obviously made a mistake on the initial lease and legally could not do anything without us agreeing to re-sign. So we kept the cat, the turtle they did not see, now deceased, and the 2 guinea pigs, also deceased. I did not want to push it further, but in theory we could have become a zoo. We carefully checked the lease every year we renewed, and they never tried to sneak in an amendment regarding pets. We had some neighbors we became friendly with who had multiple animals and asked if we could check their lease, as they signed about a year after we did. Their lease very clearly stated how many animals were allowed, and a deposit was paid for each one. I guess they got better at writing them. Story 38. My mother-in-law was evicted from her apartment. She had to move in with a friend and give away her dogs. My girlfriend and I have one of them. Story 39. Got reported by the people living behind us because my cat would sit in the window and watch them walk by every day. I told the property manager I was pet sitting for my parents and kept the blinds down for a couple of months. Then I emailed the property manager again and told them my parents were permanently moving overseas and I needed to take in their cat because she had nowhere else to go. I am sure they saw through the lie, but luckily the laws around renting with pets in my state were due to change in a few months anyway, so we got approved. Story 40. Was just told to tell your housemate with the dog that they should at least hide the beds and bowls next time there is an inspection so I can pretend I did not see any pet evidence. Story 41. This is how I got my chihuahua. The lady a few apartments down had a puppy she couldn't keep because she hadn't paid the pet deposit and couldn't afford to. I don't remember exactly what the landlord said they'd do if she didn't get rid of the dog or pay the pet rent, but I'm sure it was harsh. One day my girlfriend at the time and I were going back to my place. We had just parked and were walking towards the building when this tiny little Chihuahua puppy ran towards us. My girlfriend leaned down to greet her and she jumped into her hands. She scooped her up and we started heading towards my neighbor who was chasing after her dog. A few nights later, the same thing happened to me. As I was handing the puppy back to my neighbor, she told me what was going on. She said her toddler was too rough with the puppy and asked if I wanted to buy her since the puppy clearly liked us so much. I paid her and took the dog home the next night, putting her on the leash as soon as possible. We still have her. She's been the best little dog I've ever had. My girlfriend is my wife now. The puppy is now a spoiled 12-year-old and is in very good health for her age. We hope to keep her around as long as we can. Story 42. I found a cat while renting a pet-free apartment and kept him. The landlord came over for some unknown reason and saw the cat. I simply said I was cat-sitting. That was it. Years later, my now wife and I moved into a pet-friendly place together and informed the landlord that we had a small parrot, a green Quaker. She was fine with it, and we did not need to pay anything additional for the bird. About 6 months later, she called and asked if we had a bird. I told her, "Yes, you met her." She then insisted she never met the bird, did not know we had one, and said there were noise complaints. The bird is very quiet and always has been. We just rolled our eyes and rehomed the bird at my mother-in-law's house for a year until we could move. Story 43. My mom adopted 3 cats when I was graduating high school. We lived in a basement unit of a duplex at the time. The landlord's parents, who lived on the other side, would randomly walk in whenever they felt like it. Luckily, after we complained enough, they started to knock first. It was the knocking that we trained the cats to listen for and to run to my parents' room to hide. We would shut them in and would not let anyone inside the bedroom. We managed to keep them hidden until the month they evicted us. They did not do anything about the cats. Story 44. I typically own 2 cats at a time. Only one is ever on the lease. Without fail, I always find a pair where one is a window sitter and the other is not. Now I have 1 cat, and I tried hiding her because she has never been a window sitter. Apparently, she likes sitting by the window now that her brother is gone. She was also very unfriendly before he died, but now loves guests. The landlord met her by accident. She's 16 and has never peed outside the litter box. And I don't know what's going on. She usually loathes guests. While she was rubbing all over him, he had no issue with her. Story 45. I was briefly a landlord, and my tenant had a dog even though it was against the rules. I knew it was there and let it slide, but the dog ended up completely ruining the new carpeting I had installed. I did not go after the tenant or withhold her deposit, but that experience, among many others, definitely helped convince me to sell the house and get rid of it. Being a landlord was just not for me. Story 46. I was a kid at the time who did online school for the last 2 years of middle school, so I was home alone most of the day. I was a terrible pet owner. I rarely took him out for walks, and for most bathroom breaks, I just let him out on the patio. I loved him. He was my best friend, but I just didn't do a good job of taking care of him. We weren't even supposed to have a dog. Cats were allowed up to 2, and they had to stay indoors, but dogs were not permitted. So when poop started falling off our balcony onto the downstairs neighbor's balcony, our landlord reasoned that either I was pooping off the balcony or we had a dog. He came over when my mom was at work and banged on the door really hard. I thought I was being robbed or something. I finally confirmed it was him and opened the door. First, he told me that we weren't supposed to have a dog and that if my mom wasn't one of his best tenants, he would have kicked us out. Then he chastised me for about 2 hours for being a bad dog owner and said I had to take better care of my dog. He explained that dogs need exercise not only for physical health but for mental health, and that my dog was probably depressed and in mental agony. He had me clean up my balcony. He waited outside and never came inside, for those wondering. Then he walked me downstairs and had me apologize and offer to clean their patio, which I did. Then he made me promise to walk my dog every single day in the morning and evening and said he would be checking the cameras to make sure I did. He told me that if he didn't see me taking care of my dog, he would call animal control. I'm not sure if he actually checked, but I was too scared to lose my dog. I walked my dog twice every day after that. No more balcony poops. My mom was not happy at all that my landlord yelled at me when she wasn't home. She agreed that I needed to take better care of the dog, but she would have preferred to be home when he came by, especially when she heard he took me to the downstairs neighbors without her knowing. She didn't know about the poop falling and was so embarrassed that she bought them sushi for dinner as an apology. She called him about it, and he apologized and said his wife chewed him out too when she learned what he had done, how inappropriate it was, and that the two of them were planning to come by to apologize. My mom did apologize for the dog and said she would pay for any cleaning or damage done. But since he was my childhood dog, she didn't want to get rid of him. The landlord was understanding and said he had already talked to me about it and that if I upheld my promise to take care of him, he would overlook it. I learned about being a proper dog owner from him and even briefly worked as a dog trainer assistant because I wanted to be a better dog owner. It was a strange interaction when you think about it. Anyway, the landlord brought my dog a Christmas bone every year after that. Funny side story. My landlord also really loved one of our cats who would break out of the house every once in a while. We never figured out how he was getting outside, but apparently, he'd walk about 15 to 20 minutes all the way to my landlord's house. He and his wife were feeding him, and he'd chill with them for hours some days. The landlord didn't realize it was our cat until he came over for dinner with his wife. It was a farewell dinner because we were moving. The cat came and sat on his lap, and he was shocked and asked if it was our cat. We said yes, we'd had him since he was a kitten. We explained, and we had a laugh about it. The last time my mom talked to the landlord, a few years later, was when the cat unfortunately passed. He had asked about how the cat was doing. When he told his wife, my mom said she could hear her gasp and then break down and sob. Story 47. About 15 years ago, I had a dog and 2 cats. I couldn't hide the dog, so I paid the pet fee for him but omitted my cats since it was a per pet fee. My landlord was good about telling us when he was coming over, so I would hide my cats and their litter box in my closet on the rare occasions he stopped by. One day, I was at work and received a call from my landlord that a cat fell from the ceiling into the downstairs apartment shower while the tenant was in it. I went home to retrieve the cat and found that she had gone into my roommate's closet, which was on the back side of our shower and also had the access panel to the plumbing. It was moved slightly, so my cat went on an adventure under our tub and fell through the drop ceiling, causing quite a panic for my downstairs neighbor. Needless to say, he was not happy, but I made up a story that a friend of mine had to move and couldn't take the cat, so I offered to take it. Story 48. Not me personally, but I was the maintenance supervisor at an upscale apartment complex where cats were not allowed. One day, the manager and I were walking the property and saw a cat playing in the window of a ground floor apartment. Sadly, this started eviction proceedings. I never reported pets when I encountered them in apartments, and the manager was very sympathetic in these situations. Story 49. We had 2 cats and didn't tell them. Pest control came by about 2 years after we got them, and my girl cat, curious, came wandering out. They noted that there was a pet. The landlord called and asked. We told him we had one, but our cats look very different and they hang out on the balcony. It was only a matter of time before they found out we had 2. We told him we had just adopted one and were potentially fostering to adopt the other. He was very understanding. He only charged us one pet fee of $250, and then we paid $70 a month pet rent for the 2 cats after that. Story 50. I declared 2 cats when I moved in and paid an extra couple $100 deposit that was noted as non-refundable to get the carpets cleaned when we left. About a year later, I got a 3rd cat and successfully hid it through 2 years of inspections and maintenance call-outs. When the time came to move out, I did not bother hiding the 3rd cat during the viewings, although I do not think they noticed. I got my full deposit back, including the extra pet fee in the end. It was still pretty stressful and I would not recommend it, even though they knew about 2/3 of the cats. Story 51. In Ontario, Canada, landlords can refuse to rent to a new tenant with pets. However, once a tenant has moved in, a landlord cannot prevent the tenant from getting pets. Story 52. When I moved in, I had 1 cat and gave the office paperwork for him. I ended up getting a couple more without telling them, and it was fine for a year until a maintenance man reported it, and the office sent me a letter saying I had an unauthorized pet. I went up there and said I had paperwork, but they said they lost it. Because I was moving within the next 2 months, they told me not to worry about it. Now I have 6 cats, and my landlord loves them and has offered to give me more. Story 53. My cat is not allowed, but both my landlord and the lady doing my inspections have seen him. They both said he is cute. He also sits and naps in the window, so whenever the agency staff come around for other inspections, the likelihood of them seeing him is quite high. I live in a block with 40 apartments on the ground floor. The last time I had an inspection, I did not even put his things away. Story 54. Honestly, if they knew, they never said. My cats would always hang out in the window for everyone to see. However, when we had inspections, we took them in the carriers to my sister's for a couple of hours. Story 55. I had 3 cats in an apartment with my ex. We were only allowed 2. We never got caught. When her grandpa died and her parents had to fly a few states away, we watched their cane corso since we were the only ones who could take him for the week. He didn't bark or cause any problems, but obviously we had to take him outside for the bathroom. Someone else reported us for having a dog that wasn't on the lease. When I got a call from the apartment office staff asking about him, I explained the situation. They said they understood but warned that if it happened again, we would have to pay a $500 unregistered pet fee. Story 56. I have 2 cats that I adopted as kittens from a shelter. After meeting the litter, I went to pick up my girl the following week. She and her brother were the last 2 left. He was not spoken for, so I made a spur-of-the-moment decision to take both, despite the single pet limit in my building. They are both black. My boy is about 20 pounds, and my girl was the runt of the litter, but they are similar enough to look the same from a distance or through a window. We had a leak a few years ago, and my landlord had to enter the apartment. He saw both cats. Thankfully, we are so hygienic that he did not even know I had 1 cat. He ended up being fine with it and even said that my girl is so small there is no need for an extra pet deposit. Story 57. We had to get rid of the pets, move out, or face eviction. We moved out. Story 58. I don't think he cares. I told him I adopted 2 cats, and he pretended to write something down. I never received any pet deposit. Maybe he forgot. Story 59. When I was at university, I managed to successfully hide my pet rabbit for about 18 months, until a routine check was done and I forgot to close the box that hid his cage. I was summoned to a meeting with the management that ran the accommodation. After a little begging and explaining that I would only be there for another 6 months as it was my final year, he was allowed to stay. Management told me afterwards that my rabbit was so friendly that they stopped to give him a little attention. Story 60. As someone with non-conventional pets, currently rats, but I also like rabbits, pigeons, and ball pythons, it absolutely is worth it to me. Just know if you get caught, there is no one to blame but yourself. It also helps that I have a backup plan and am very meticulous about hiding everything when the repairman comes around. If I do get caught, my pets are not going to end up in a shelter somewhere. Yes, it is a hassle at the same time. Back when I got my rats and was looking for places, I did start out disclosing them. I quickly learned to be quiet. One place quoted me the same $500 pet fee as dogs and cats, and that is if they even allow non-dog or cat pets in the first place. 3 pet limit and nothing over 50 pounds. Please, even for 6 rats living in a single cage. Part of the frustration is also the stigma and ignorance. Yes, you can have a phobia of rats, snakes, and tarantulas, but what are the chances they are going to hop out of the tank and attack you? It does not make sense to me to allow dogs and cats to walk all over the carpet and shed everywhere, bark at 6 a.m., spray in corners and chew on walls, and then turn around and say that a hamster or gecko is going to cause just as much damage. I understand both sides. It takes just one bad pet owner to let their pet go wild and ruin it for everyone else. But it has been such a headache to find apartments that allow what I have that this is the choice I have made. I cannot afford a house. Story 61. This actually happened to me. I lived in one apartment for 18 months with my cat. No problems. I moved to a bigger unit and almost immediately received a notice that I had a pet and no pets were allowed. I suspect my new downstairs neighbor complained. Went to the office to ask about the policy and mentioned that every neighbor around me had cats. They said they all had doctor notes for their animals, maybe for emotional support or something. I talked to my doctor, got a note, and sent it to management. Problem solved. Story 62. My neighbor, who is very allergic to cats, rented her apartment while working in another country. The contract specifically stated no cats, although dogs and guinea pigs were allowed. The new renter ignored this and brought in a cat. I noticed and informed the neighbor, who had asked me to keep an eye on the apartment. The renter had to pay for a professional deep cleaning by a specialist when they left. He was an expensive cat. Story 63. I had 2 cats and did not want to pay a deposit or the additional monthly pet fee since money was tight. After living there for 7 years, the apartment complex started giving everyone annual inspections. The first inspection went fine. The next year, I received a letter stating I had illegal cats and had to get rid of them. I went to the leasing office and told them I had paid the deposit when I moved in. I knew that no one working there was employed at that time. They could not find any of my original paperwork, only my most recent lease renewals, so they started charging the monthly fee from that point on. Story 64. We were having a poker night, and he was taking a drunken walk around the neighborhood after our local football team had lost badly. He saw all the cars in front of the house he rents out and thought we were throwing some sort of party. He walked in to find 2 tables of 6 men smoking, drinking, and quietly playing an intense $300 poker game. He ended up buying in for a few, intending to stay for only a few hands. He saw our 2 dogs and 2 cats. We had told him there was only 1 small dog, and decided we could pay the pet deposit whenever we wanted. We paid that month, but it was kind of nice that he was cool about it. He also apologized for crashing his tenant's house the next day, but we understood. Story 65. Friends of mine in college lived in a house for a couple of years with 2 cats and thought they had gotten away with not reporting them to the leasing agent. They received a call a couple of weeks after they moved out from an irate property manager, who said that one of the new tenants was in the hospital and nearly died because of severe allergies. I know they demanded all the deposit back, and there may have been a threat of legal action. This was in the late 1990s, so I do not clearly remember. They definitely felt terrible about the situation, and none of us had considered that as a consequence of avoiding pet fees. Story 66. My landlord found out because my roommate committed suicide. She did not see the cat directly, but there were cat toys and it was obvious. She and I were on good terms. Nothing was ever said. I still hide 1 cat to this day. You will not find her if she does not know you. Story 67. He said, my plumber said you have a rabbit in your house. Now obviously the contract says no pets. But if I don't know you have a rabbit, you don't have a rabbit. So tell me, do you have a pet rabbit? I said no. I continued having the rabbit in my house for another 9 years, making sure there was no evidence that I had a pet rabbit. One time my landlord was over while we were sorting out some work to be done. The rabbit was outside, and he saw him and said, there are some funny-looking cats in this neighborhood. I hope your neighbor's cat doesn't dig in the garden too much, or something to that effect. He was a pretty chill guy. Story 68. Landlord here. I don't care if you have pets, but lying to me means I won't be renewing your lease. Pets can cause damage, so I require extra insurance if you have one. Costs about $30 a month, and if you can't afford that, you can't afford a pet. When I first rented my place out, I was naive and said it was no problem. However, a tenant's dog destroyed carpets, chewed on things, and caused thousands of dollars in damage that I had to cover. The insurance requires me to register the breed and age of the pets, and I'm not covered if the information is inaccurate. Be upfront, pay the extra, and everyone will be happy. Story 69. Luckily in Australia, a law was passed recently where landlords cannot refuse pets. Story 70. I was evicted. To be fair, the landlord found out because he was there with the police and a detective for other reasons. Story 71. They never found out. Also, they had the audacity to have people donate to the local shelter to win a free month rent, when none of their apartments allow pets. They own almost all of the apartments in the entire town, meaning no one with pets can rent in my town, and no one renting can actually adopt from the shelter. Forget them. Story 72. A major cause of the terrible situation of feral cats And the suffering they endure is that irresponsible people think they can get away with it and then get kicked out of the apartment, leaving the cat to fend for itself. This behavior is completely irresponsible. Story 73. We had a tenant move in with no pets and explained that if they wanted to get one, they should speak with us first so we could come to an agreement. Several months later, the tenant posted pictures on social media with their new member of the family. We were surprised and reminded them of our previous conversation. They did not want to pay the pet deposit and ended up getting rid of the dog. Story 74. I was told I had 3 days to remove the animal or pay a pet deposit. Story 75. Mine was a property manager rather than the actual landlord. We had a rabbit in a cage, although we often let him out to run around when we were home. Where I live, flat inspections require 24 hours notice. They cannot just show up unannounced. One day, we got home from work and found a letter on the counter that said, "Sorry, I forgot to give notice and came for a flat inspection. Is the rabbit yours?" We just said, "No, we're looking after it for a few days while a friend is traveling." And that was that. I think they realized they did not have a leg to stand on as they had illegally entered our property without us there. We did not have a leg to stand on either since we had an illegal pet. So everyone just did not say or do anything further on the matter until we left. Story 76. When I moved to a different state, I wrecked my car the week I was supposed to move. It took 2 weeks for them to fix it, so I was not able to move in when my roommates got the keys. Somehow, my cat was missed in the move-in process, and they only knew about my 2 roommates' dogs. The first time we had a maintenance request, someone noted the cat, and I got an email saying that she was not listed and I would have to pay a pet deposit. I said, "Okay, fair enough. Send me the form, and I will fill it out." The office never sent the form. 2 weeks later, I got an email saying, "We are just following up. We really need to get the cat and the pet deposit on the lease." Again, I said, "Sure, just send me the paperwork." Still, no one got back to me. After the 3rd time they asked, my roommate asserted herself and showed that I was doing my due diligence, and they were the ones not following through. I never heard another word about it. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.